In this week's episode, we are here to talk about a strategy that is core to our work and often has leaders taking a big, deep sigh of relief when they hear it. What's that strategy? We call it the Trinity Principle. It is about doing far less, but better, so we can have more time, expansiveness, and connection to our community. It's about choosing wisely and carefully where we want to be and how we want to engage in the digital space so we can do way better digital than any of our competitors or anyone else around us who is trying to be everywhere for everyone all at the same time. You want to know what the Trinity Principle is and how it works? We'll see you inside the episode. So what is the Trinity Principle? I've talked about it a few times before on the show, but I want to go over it for people who are new here and some of the things that have evolved for us in the past year about our thinking around the Trinity Principle. So simply put, the Trinity Principle is one of the keys to how we design digital strategies. And it says that no matter what the size of your platform is, 3 platforms are all you ever need to get as much business, as many leads, as many sales as you ever needed when executed properly. So the Trinity Principle states that 3 platforms are all a business ever needs, no matter your size, to get as many leads and sales as you ever need when executed properly. That is very different from the advice that most of us get in the digital space. Most of us are so bogged down in FOMO, fear of missing out, right? We feel like we need to be everywhere all the time. We feel like we are missing something if we aren't jumping on the biggest platforms or the newest platforms. So just in the last year, just in 2020, we've had platforms like Clubhouse and TikTok and Geneva and on and on and on and on and on. I can't even think of them all right in this minute. There've been so many in 2020 popping up that we keep hearing are the next big thing. And then there's also the big juggernauts like Facebook and Instagram, technically both owned by Facebook, right? That we're told if we're serious about our business, if we're serious about our work, that we have to be on those platforms, that no serious business would skip them. And full disclosure, as you've heard me say about many of the things we talk about on this show, I was guilty of saying something like that in the past about Facebook, where I was circa 2010-ish telling people that if they were serious about their business, they really had to be on Facebook. And here's the thing. It's not that I think that that was wrong advice. In fact, it's still difficult for me to tell a small local business not to use a Facebook page. I will probably tell, at least for the next foreseeable future, a local business that they absolutely must use Google My Business if they want to use search as a part of their strategy. But here's why the Trinity Principle came to be and how our thinking about where you need to be and what platforms you use and how many of them you use have evolved. So, a couple of things happen. The first one is a values-driven thing. So, the early days of social media, pre-algorithm apocalypses, pre-everyone and their brother being on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and blah, 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 blah for their business, there was really a lot of value in being on multiple platforms because there wasn't as much competition and there wasn't as much noise. And we were still really trying to figure out which platforms would be the thing, right? And we didn't have the audience intelligence that we have now. And so a lot of us kind of sprinkled all over the place on every single platform. And that brought about this real pain of trying to figure out how to create and disseminate content across all of these platforms. So enter some of the tools that y'all are probably familiar with to help automate that process. The Buffers and Meet Edgars and Hootsuites of the world that allow you to disseminate content across many platforms, scheduled in advance, usually, and here's the kicker where marketers ruined it, usually without any customizations for what's right for that platform. And so what happened is that we made it easier to use lots of different platforms. And in doing so, the value of being on lots of different platforms started to come down because lots of content started to be everywhere. There started to be way too much noise. And I started seeing this myself and wondering why, as I was like loading stuff into Buffer to auto post, I was definitely doing it for myself and for clients, why it felt not great, why it felt out of integrity. And when I sat with it and I examined it, the reason was that I realized we were contributing a lot of noise without really contributing value. Even if the content itself was great and had value. Because if we were auto posting to a platform that we were not engaged with, we were dishonoring that audience by asking them to take our stuff without engaging back with them. That's kind of what search and sales and push marketing and stuff like that is all about, right? It's not the purpose of what social was supposed to be about. And it feels, therefore, when we do it, a little disingenuous. And as often is the case, the more people did it, the more they did this kind of shitty thing that didn't really contribute anything to the space, just throwing their content into it, the more you started to get punished for it. So algorithms started doing things to combat this auto posting because the users of those platforms don't really like it. So the users of a social media platform go there to interact. We don't go to Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn to buy things. We don't go to Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn to consume things. We go to Google when we want to do that. When we are intentionally going to buy, we don't go to our social media platforms. When we are intentionally looking for an answer, we don't go to our social media platforms unless we're doing like asking for a recommendation or asking the audience to give us feedback. That is the purpose of a search engine. So when we go into a social media platform to sell things, we have to use practices as businesses that circumvent the will of the person that is there. It's very much like traditional advertising, right? Someone reading a magazine, someone watching a TV show, they're there to read the article, to watch the show, not the commercials, not the ad, unless it's the Super Bowl, which many of us watch for the ads, right? So we have to do all kinds of things to get people to engage in our content, to get people to buy our thing in social media, because it's not the purpose of that platform. And that's why the people who do the best on a social media platform, the ones who become influencers, the ones who engage an audience and really get a lot of the sales, are the ones who spend time there. Significant amounts of time there. So in my world, I work with a lot of people who have a fair bit of Instagram influence. They would be called Instagram influencers, right? And I used to work with a lot of people that were Facebook influencers. And the thing they have in common is that they're not auto-posting to those platforms. They may be auto-posting their content over to Twitter or over to LinkedIn or out to Medium, but they're not auto-posting in their core platform. They're using their core platform as an engagement platform, especially early on. This is actually kind of side note, bunny trail. One of the things that trips up traditional marketers or traditionally grown celebrities when they try to come into the social space. They're used to it being all about them and people just like consuming them. And in the social space, the expectation of influencers is that they will engage back, that it's not a one-way thing, that it's a back and forth conversation, at least in perception. So the reason the Trinity Principle came to be in the context of all of this is that for a business of the size of most of ours, so not with hundreds of employees, not with a 30-person social media team, it's impossible to be really engaged with more than a couple of platforms at one time. In fact, it's pretty difficult to be really engaged with more than one platform at a time. But because of FOMO, because of fear of missing out, because we read it on some dumb digital strategist blog, we think we should be everywhere. We think that the auto poster makes sure that we don't miss out of whatever's going on in this platform over here. And no offense to Buffer or anything, but it kind of makes social media suck even more because you're filtering through so much noise. And the investment that is made in that auto posting, with some exceptions for SEO on a couple of platforms like Twitter, is just not worth the effort or the energy. It's not worth the alienating of that audience when they ask something of you and it's crickets because no one is there to engage back. It's not worth the hundreds of thousands of faux pas we see all the time because someone posted something on a platform that doesn't work there and they fundamentally don't understand why or why it doesn't work there. So the Trinity Principle is about doing less but better in your digital marketing strategy. 3 platforms. Now, if you're working with us, if you're working with the Genevieve Digital team, one of your platforms is always going to be search. We think of this as search engine marketing. Now, some digital marketers will think of search engine marketing only as the paid part of search, and then SEO, that's search engine optimization, as the organic part. But I really like to think of search engine marketing as a holistic whole. It's the marrying of the organic and the paid to get a holistic picture of how your company dominates a search, primarily a Google search. So it may combine ads and rich snippets, which are pieces of content like those FAQs. It may include Google Stories or YouTube videos or image search. And it's a holistic strategy that takes a lot of time, energy, and effort. That's one platform. Then you get 2 more, right? And for most of our clients, the next platform is email. Email is so important. It is still one of the most dominant, if not the most dominant, ways to market to an audience. And the great thing about an email list is it gives back and gives back and gives back. The more intentionality that you put into it, and it's yours, it belongs to you as long as you don't break it. Over time, it contributes value for over and over and over and over. In fact, I know people who built their fundamental core email list when social media was a lot easier to do this through in like 2012, 2013, 2010. And that core email list really hasn't changed or grown very much in 10 years. And yet it is still the deeply connected community that feeds that business. I know people who built their 20 to 30,000 person email list, which isn't even a really big one, 10 years ago, and are still running a thriving business just off of that list. That's how powerful your email list is. So for most of our clients, SEM and email, those are 2. So they get 1 more platform, and that's where we play. We play with sometimes Instagram, although y'all know how I feel about anything owned by Zuck. We play with Medium and LinkedIn even more often. We play with podcasting or Clubhouse or things like that. And that's the power of the Trinity Principle. If you have 1 platform, so this is what some digital marketers will recommend to you, right? They will say, pick one platform and go really deep and spend all your time there. And I get why they say that, because it is easier to do one platform than to do three. And focus is really important. And I believe in the one thing principle. But here's the problem that I've seen as someone who's lived through so many algorithm changes when you depend on one platform. If there's a change that negatively impacts your business, or if the platform loses popularity, or if the platform makes a fundamental change that makes it more expensive to do business there, and you have no other platforms, your business is immediately in trouble. This is what happened to a lot of Instagram influencers a few years ago, right? Instagram went, like every other platform before it, from being mostly organic to being a pay-to-play platform for most people. And it tanked a lot of businesses that relied only on Instagram for traffic, just like Facebook a few years before that. And it happens over and over and over again. So I've been through this enough times at this point that I don't believe in having all your eggs in one basket with a digital platform. Even email and search, this can be dangerous. Even though email and search are a little bit less likely to totally screw you over, even though your email list belongs to you, if email and search if one of them is the only thing, if there's a fundamental core change, it could really affect your bottom line. Like, email didn't used to have much filtering at all, but now there's a lot of filtering that happens with email, and I've seen lists be broken I've seen delivery rates for lists be broken with no reason really to the owner, other than maybe they were missing a technical thing that they didn't understand or something like that. And it can really create issues. I've seen people fall out of the SERPs because of a change that really wasn't their fault, but they still had to grapple with, and it takes time to come back. So by having three platforms, instead of having all your eggs in one basket, if something happens with one of your platforms, the others are still going so that you can figure out what's going on and make a change. It may be a platform change, or it may be adapting to an algorithm change, or it may be cleaning up your list or something like that. But by having three platforms all going at the same time, one of them having a pain point doesn't tank your whole business. It doesn't leave you scrambling. It gives you space to adapt and figure out what the change is without totally tanking your sales. Now, what that third platform is for a lot of our clients really varies wildly. This is a place where we will experiment and play, and we will sometimes jump platforms when a platform becomes less useful. I have actively been advocating with many of my clients to move most of their eggs out of the Instagram basket. I just don't see the payoff for most people from Instagram that it used to have. And to me, as a values-driven marketing strategist, I am out of integrity, and I think a lot of my clients are out of integrity if they give their money to Facebook to make their Instagram following more useful. So if you're investing in Instagram ads in order to keep your posts at the engagement level that you're used to, you're giving money, to me, to the most problematic of the digital companies right now. You're giving money to the company that I believe is partially directly responsible for the state of things in America today. So it's out of integrity for me as a values-driven marketer, and it's out of integrity for a lot of my clients. And yet they're still doing it because they don't know a way out. And that's the power of the Trinity Principle, is that you have a way out. So when something breaks your values, you can pivot. Now, how do you choose the right platform? How do you know which ones to use? Well, I have a very strong bias towards pretty much every company should be investing in SEM and SEO. That's search engine marketing, search engine optimization. I can show you reels and reels of data. If you want it, you can send me an email or message us on one of your favorite platforms, showing you how over the course of 5 years, search engine marketing pays back 5 times more than social media. And part of the reason is that in a lot of algorithmic things in search, you are paid dividends for tenure. I tell people a lot of times when they're thinking about changing their domain name, for example, that the one thing you can't cheat in search is tenure. How long have you been there? And this is why you will sometimes see terrible websites that look like they were built in the 1990s coming up really high in really competitive searches. Because those websites very well might have been built in the 1990s. And yet their resources, their information on the topic that you're searching for is so good that they continue to show up because they have been there longer and been consistently the right resource for people. Whereas in social media, you're basically only as good as what you did today. That's it. This is why when people come to me talking about viral videos, I just kind of chuckle and I'm like, let's see if you got the shit in place for that viral video to be worth anything. Because very few things are more common in my work with influencers than viral videos that do zero for the business. Now, don't get me wrong. I've seen a viral post or a viral video be the catalyst that a business takes off from. But that only happens when they have the right infrastructure in place so that when that virility happens, there are things that can be bought. There are lead journeys to go into. There are customer paths to go down. And most small companies don't have those things set up. So if they get a little bit of viralness from a post or from a video, it'll dry up in a week or two and there's nothing left. That's the nature of social. Whereas if you get something that really hits in search, it's likely to have a tail that will pay off for years. Now, here's a caveat. Not something that pays off because you did some manipulative shit and it's like gonna show up for a couple of days and then tank like a rock and fall right out of the algorithms. This is why bad backlinks and keyword stuffing and shit like that doesn't work anymore. It may pick you up for a couple of days, even in today's search world. But as soon as you have a fresh crawl, you're gonna have trouble. So I'm not gonna go too far down that rabbit hole, except to say, don't do manipulative shit in search. We've already talked about that, right? We invest in SEO, SEM with a long-term thought process. How do we want this to serve us in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years? That's the difference when we're thinking about that investment. And that's why it tends to pay off more over time. Email is the same way. We're investing in nurturing and building a community for the long haul. It's much more difficult to do that in social because things are constantly changing, and a new platform, or a new feature on an old platform, which is giving organic reach, which will be so good and feel too good to pass up in the short term, is almost always designed for monetization in the long term, and therefore it's not something that you can use as a core strategy. You could use it as like a short term, this is going to help me through this launch, or I'm going to milk this as long as I can. But if you're building that into a core strategy, you're going to experience pain. As a lot of people who thought Instagram Live was going to fundamentally change the way the online business world operated, and that has not been the case except for a handful of people. Why? Because Instagram is a pay-to-play platform now. I'm not saying you can't get some clients from Instagram organically. I'm not saying that you can't get work out of Instagram. I'm not saying that your business may not be built off of Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or whatever. What I'm saying is, if you want sustainable long-term results that don't require you to give blood, sweat, and tears every single day, those platforms are not the place to invest the primary parts of your energy. It's much better served in search and in email. Now, that third platform, how do you choose the right one? If I've got you convinced that you're doing email and search all out, what's the third one? Maybe it's Instagram. If you are in fashion or you're a coach or personal coach, if you are in health and wellness, or if you are in interior design, those are like low-hanging photography. Those are still low-hanging fruit for Instagram. It's not as easy as it used to be, but I wouldn't just flippantly tell you don't use Instagram. If you're in B2B, you seriously need to consider investing some real time on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really great for B2B. It's also really great for realtors and investment consultants and marketing consultants. It's not that other types of businesses can't build on these platforms. It's just particularly good for certain types. If you're in media, so you're a journalist or a thinker or a thought leader, then I want you to really think hard about Medium, particularly if you have some writing skills. I love Medium. It's one of my favorite platforms because it both contributes to your search strategy and gives you some social aspects. Twitter is great for, again, if you're in media, if you are in certain types of thought leadership, if you are in sports, if you are marketing to men, that's a place to look at. Some of the newer ones like Clubhouse, you have to know if you are choosing those platforms as a part of your strategy that you are treating them like they could be temporary. Because every year, a next big thing comes along. Every couple months, for that matter, a next big thing comes along. And most of them don't stick. Even when they get to what we think of as scale, where they get, 10, 20, 30 million users. An example of this for right now is TikTok. I may be going against the grain a little bit by saying this, but I'm not sure that TikTok is here to stay. I understand that they have a huge user base, and I think that their huge user base is gonna wear out on it. We saw a version of this happen. We've seen versions of this happen with other platforms. I'm not going to get platform specific because I'll date ourselves. I'm going to date myself real hard. I just really want you to think hard about whether investment in a brand new platform is the right choice for you. And it could be. I don't want to discount early adapter advantage. Because if you are an early adapter on a platform that is new, there is advantage and early audience building that's difficult to replicate in any other way. This is what happened to the Mari Smiths and the Amy Porterfields of the world with Facebook pages. This is what happened with the Marie Forleos of the world with YouTube. This is what happened with many people, I'm not going to name names here because some of them are in my community, on Instagram, where they really got an undue amount of attention because they were an early adapter and they were in the first handful of people in that space that they've really milked ever since from their business. So that could be you too. But it's sort of like playing the lottery in that okay, you know what? I'm going to use a different example. It's more like playing poker, because playing the lottery is basically a game of chance, and that's not what's happening here. But playing poker does involve some skill. You can be really good at it, but there is an element of chance that's also really important too. And that's what engaging really heavily on a new platform is. It could be, if you have a lot of skill and you do it really well, a great advantage. But there's luck involved that you have less control over than other places. So think carefully about your risk tolerance, your ability to pivot, what your on-ramp is for cash flow and things like that before you invest too heavily in new platforms. So how do you choose the right platform? I think I've said that like 5 times, right? You want me to tell you. Okay, so here's a few ways. First, I want you to think with your heart, not with your head. What do you like to do? It is a bad idea to invest a lot of time, energy, and effort into a platform that is driven off of something that you don't like to do. So if you're not a photographer, you don't like to take pictures, Instagram is not the place for you. If you are really uncomfortable on video and you have no intention of ever figuring out how to get comfortable, then YouTube is not the place for you. Neither is Instagram Live or Facebook Live or any other video platform. If you don't like to write, then Medium is probably a bad idea. Most of these platforms are centered around a core type of creativity that can be manipulated in lots of different ways, but you have to care about that form. So for example, I really like to write and speak. So YouTube and Medium and Twitter and places like that can really be, and Clubhouse and podcasting can really be platforms for me, because those are things I care enough about to invest time, energy, effort, and money into getting better. They light me up. They make me feel joy. I don't really give a shit about taking pictures. So every time I try to get into Instagram, it feels a little flat for me. Now, you can argue that there are some great writers who have built huge platforms on Instagram because they invest in the writing, not the pictures, but I would posit that those are the exceptions that prove the rule. In general, if you stick with a platform that is related to the places where you actually like to create, you're going to be happier. Same thing happens to me, incidentally, with Pinterest. Pinterest is kind of a curator space. You have to really want to collect and curate and organize other people's things. And that's just not me. I don't have a lot of interest in that. So that's another place that hasn't worked so well for me. Could I invest a lot of time? Have I invested a lot of time? Have I invested for clients in these platforms? Absolutely. And it doesn't feel as good. I'm not as interested. I don't find innovative things as often. I don't have that spark that happens when something is related to something I feel really passionate about. So when the days are hard and when I don't want to make something, like honestly, y'all, sitting down to record this podcast today. In real time, I'm recording this on a Sunday afternoon. I really did not want to put on makeup and get dressed and sit and talk to people today. It wasn't my thing. It wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. I'd like to still be in my pajamas, maybe sipping a glass of wine. But I'm passionate about both the topic and the medium. So as soon as I sat down in front of my microphone, I started to get into it. I started to warm up. I started to come alive because this is the kind of thing that I love to do. You want that feeling for what you choose as your third platform. And then, only then, once you have that feeling and you've kind of narrowed down the platforms based on your values and what sparks you and what's creative, fun for you, then you look at which platforms. How many users are there? How many of your persona are there? For example, if you are not marketing to teenagers and early 20-somethings, I don't give a flying fuck how big TikTok is. Right now, that's probably not the place for you. Is it aging? Sure it is. But the usership of people in their 40s or 50s or 60s is simply not there enough to make the time investment worth it. The flip side is true of Facebook, by the way, today. So if your user base is younger and you happen to be maybe a little older, so you're investing a lot of time on Facebook, you might want to rethink that strategy. Because as my 16-year-old son tells me all the time, nobody younger than 30, mom, this is how he says it, nobody younger than 30, mom, is using the F. I don't know why he calls it the F, but I like it. Okay, so looking at your personas, where they're hanging out, what platforms do they use? In fact, when we do personas for clients, we tell them which platforms we think their personas are most likely to communicate on and recommend that they choose their platforms based on that. We do the research. We find their personas and where they gather. And that means that this third platform may not be one of the big social media places at all. It may be something like a small forum specific to your industry. It may be something like a Reddit thread specific to your audience. It may be something like a group curated by somebody else specific to your audience. In the space that I work and play in a lot of the times, this happened with B School, right? For all the shit about Marie Forleo's B School had so many people in this audience of online trainers and coaches and personal development and health and wellness people that came into this audience over the last 10 years and have grown up through the Marie Forleo B School community, that there are lots of businesses that are built almost entirely off of being a part of that community. So it may be that your third platform is carefully curated inside of somebody else's community. Now, I do want you to be careful with that because that community needs to be big enough and growing and thriving enough, and you need to be in integrity with that community. But what I want you to see is this third platform may not be a social media platform at all. If you're a local business, that third platform might be a local-centric thing, like a Google My Business or a Alignable or a Patch or something that's centric to your community. Finally, for some businesses, your third platform in the Trinity Principle might not be digital at all. It might be a traditional platform. Now, I very rarely recommend at this point that people use TV commercials or newspaper advertisements or things like that. But I do recommend to a lot of small companies, especially those that are one or two people and just starting out and don't have a lot of cash flow, organizations like BNI or BPW or in-person style networking organizations where they're building some strong relationships that maybe they don't have already. Those can serve as a platform as well. So think outside the box here. The core of the Trinity Principle is trying to get you to do less but better, to choose 3 places to build your marketing around so that you can center and focus in a way that is reasonable for you to execute well on every single thing that you do. So here's an example from my own company to show you how this works. Right now in 2021, we are heavily invested in SEO, SEM through our website, which is new for us, by the way. I've been doing this for other people for so many years and hadn't really invested the time myself. And I was like, wow, this is really out of integrity. Let's get into this. So that's a place that we've been investing really heavily. Also into our podcast. We invest very, very heavily in our podcast. That's why you can find this show not just here in your podcast feed if you're listening to it, but you also might be watching it on YouTube with custom captioning, which of course we do first for accessibility, but also is great for business and contributes back to our search strategy. And then our third platform is a couple of communities that I'd like to not say out loud because I don't want to have them bombarded, related to some personal development work that we're doing. So some online community that I paid to be a part of that is a core place where we integrate and communicate and connect with the specific people that we are trying to serve. And that particular community is small. There's about 600 people in it. But the 600 people that are in there are all, almost to a person, in our target audience. And I'm also a part of that community in a really integral way. So I'm not just there to sell to people. I am there to engage and be a part of that community. So I feel very committed to that group over and beyond my business. And so it's a great place because I get a sense of purpose and it helps build my business. It's super cool. That's where we're at with our 3 platforms in 2021. And I want you to see that because it can evolve and change over time. But if you print it out like your marketing strategy 1 page and you only ever could have 3 platforms at any one time, wouldn't that make you have like a deep sigh of relief? You don't have to use the auto posters anymore. You don't have to be everywhere. In fact, I recommend that you choose intentionally not to be. I recommend that you choose to be the places where you are excited to be there and lit up. I recommend that you choose to, at least for 2 of your platforms, be in places that you own, like a website, like SEO, SEM that comes from your website, like podcasts, like email list, where you own the created thing, which is very different from your social media platforms. So I know that this is going to be a weird concept for a lot of you because I know many of the people who listen to me, who engage with me, have either built their audience on or have totally bought into the idea that they need to build their audience on social media platforms. So I really want you to sit with this Trinity Principle. Maybe do some journaling about it, think about it. You're welcome to send us a message if you have questions about it. And I want you to go to realignyourstrategy.com and download our checklist for evaluating where you are in your business that we talked about last week, that we introduced the concepts to you in last week's show, because this is going to help you choose those platforms. So if you haven't done that already, I'd really like for you to go through it and think about it before you just toss this idea out, because I know it's going to feel really weird for some of you that have been invested in social media or felt like social media is the only place to grow your business. And if you're using an auto poster to put your content on every platform out there that you have no intention of ever being a real user of, I would love to encourage you to go and turn those off. I'm okay with using a scheduling tool if that's what you need to do to get your social media into the world. I like Later for Instagram, for example. I'm okay with platforms like Buffer or Meet Edgar if they're being used intentionally to get intentionally created content put together and ready to go out in a way that's more manageable for you. But I'd love for you to consider an experiment, maybe just for 30 days, of turning off any automatic posting that's happening to platforms that you don't actively engage in. See if it makes any difference whatsoever to your business. I'd be willing to bet you money that it doesn't, and that you will feel a lot better and be more in integrity with the way that you want to show up in the digital space if you don't put your shit where you're not willing to clean up after it. All right, that might be a little harsh, but that's kind of the way I feel about it. If you're not willing to show up there and clean up if you make a mistake, if you're not willing to show up there and engage and clarify, then you shouldn't be putting your stuff there. So it's really important, I think, to go turn those auto posters off. Try it for 30 days, see how it goes for you. I bet you won't even notice a difference. And you'll feel better and more in an integrity in the places where you are at. Now, there's one other thing that I want to say to you before we wrap this up. A lot of what happens for those of us who are trying to be everywhere with social media is not really business strategy. It's social media addiction, technology addiction, and or avoidance of doing the real work in our business. See, it's easier for someone who's trying to sell you a course or a cookie cutter marketing system to tell you to build a newsletter or post 3 times a week on Instagram or make a YouTube video every day. It's easier for them to tell you that than to tell you to do the thing that you're probably terrified of, which is look a person in the eye and ask them to buy something from you. But the truth is that most people in the early stages of their business, and I don't mean early stages by months or years, I mean early stages by sustainable sales. Most people in the early stages of their business, the way that they get sales is to look people in the eye and ask for the sale. But we confuse marketing and sales too often. We say them in the exact same sentence, and we use marketing to hide. If you're posting on Instagram every day, but don't have any sales, and you really need to make money, if you're posting a video on YouTube every day, but don't have any followers, and you really need to make money, if you're tweeting 15 times a day, but don't have any sales, and you really need to make money, I would love to ask you to sit with the question of, is there a combination here that's super heady of hiding an addiction rather than actual work? And how could you break that and face the work of actually growing your space and business and financial means in the world so that you can have what you want? I don't want to minimize the pain and the stress of this. It's very hard to face. But I just see way too often that we're using all of our time, energy, and effort to post on social media. And what we're really doing is hiding from the really scary thing of asking people to work with us. So if that's happening to you, I implore you to figure out what the first step is for you to breaking up with hiding and busy work so that you can have whatever it is that you want to have in your work. For me, that was thinking of the platforms that we use in the context of the Trinity Principle. I hope it helps you as much as it helped me, and I would love it if you would hop over to realignyourstrategy.com and tell us how it helped you and what platforms you're using. We'll see y'all next week.